And hypothetically, we're live. Hey, we're on episode 2 of Shiftless. What have you been up to in the past week? Anything new and exciting, or?
Well, I meant to ask you this before we got on the air, but I was invited to do something that I think you're aware of, and I think you've been courted on the same realm. And is that even something that we want to get into, or do we want to save that?
That's actually at the top of my list. I think we'll touch on it some, but I don't think we need to deep dive into it until things are a little more fleshed out. Well, we'll talk about it some. So yeah, I was excited to hear that you were part of that equation too. So I think that might the evolution of that project might make for some good content on these going forward. I see it being very useful to lean on some of your expertise and knowledge for that adventure as well. How about just Brad World in general? Anything new in fam or Chef Brad land or going on with the family?
Announcing April dates today. I don't know when anybody will hear this. It's probably irrelevant. And then getting ramped up for cooking class. I've got pizza class tomorrow night. So I got to make dough today. That's about it.
Myself, I went to visit my folks in Florida over the weekend. So I had 15 hours of driving each way. So I got caught up on a lot of podcasts of other stuff that, hey, this is stuff I touched on. I started this podcast a while back, but never really did more with it. Listened to this one a little bit. So, I was listening to stuff from 2019,
Yeah.
So, but it's still, the content's still relevant.
I have a question about listening to a podcast from 2019. Did it stick out or seem odd, or did you even notice that it was a time pre-pandemic and there's like zero mention of it or anything like that?
Funny you bring that up. Quite frankly, that particular series I was listening to, I was specifically wanting to listen to it as it led up to and came into 2020 and pandemic times to see what that shift looked like. It was related to gravel riding and gravel events and stuff like that. I wanted to kind of get a reminder of what that shift was for the event.
Yeah.
The way it worked for us was COVID came around. It was starting to be in the headlines of, there's a virus in China sort of thing. Mm-hmm. About the time we were doing our 2020 Texas Chainring Massacre. Ultimately, that was our biggest Texas Chainring Massacre ever by a large shot. We're kind of riding this gravel wave with others, but doing it a little bit different. And our big event is doing it, saying from the grassroots basis. So we got off Texas Chainring Massacre, and we were kind of sort of the last major event unaffected by COVID. Thursday before Mid-South was when just everything blew up. And I think that's when the NBA shut down and all of that sort of stuff.
I do remember all that.
There were some effects on Mid-South in different degrees, and I don't want to get into that because I don't want it to sound like I'm editorializing about that situation. But Bobby in the Mid-South kind of got caught between a rock and a hard place at multiple levels, and it definitely affected their attendance and their event, but they still had it that year. But it wasn't the event it should have been for that year for various reasons.
I think it's fair to say that in those beginning times, nobody knew what the play was. Whoa, how do we handle this? Especially when you have a big event, what do you do when everything's so uncertain? I think Mid-South offered, I can't remember what they did. I remember what a couple of people did, but they said, we'll honor your entry for next year if you choose not to attend. And I think there were a couple of events that were like, it's rain or shine, and, you're losing if you don't come. So, but, like I said, we were in a difficult spot with FAM. That was our first year of inception, and when it came around, we were like, man, we need to be doing dinners, but is it too early to, and it was like, do we defer to the mayor and the governor and what they're saying and everything and kind of follow, or, and it was tough.
The Mid-South did offer the deferral option to people that weren't comfortable with coming there. And like I said, with as fast as things changed and as unknown as everything was, I don't blame Bobby or Mid-South for what people may look backwards on and say wasn't exactly the best way to approach things. I'm not one of those by any stretch of the imagination, but there are people out there that kind of took that opinion.
Hindsight's 50-50, right?
I'm so worn out by everything pandemic and COVID related. It just drains me anymore because it was difficult for everyone, but for the stuff we do, it was so much stop and start and try to go this way, try to go that way. We kind of finally seem to be back to normal with definitely a tinge of new normal. Things are different now than they were, and I'm not saying it's because of COVID restrictions or anything like that. It's just that really weird 2020 to the end of 2022. The gravel scene changed, the event structures changed, the participants changed. Things are different out there, and we're adjusting and getting caught up now, which is fascinating and interesting and keeps me engaged, but you just can't take anything for granted. And that was part of why I started listening to some of those podcasts from the past. I wanted to get a better sense of how, for lack of a better term, the market has shifted, right? Because everybody was kind of in their own little bubbles during all that COVID stuff. So stuff that might be happening in Utah or Vermont or Georgia or whatever else, which may have ultimately shifted the way event organization is expected or understood to go on. Maybe we weren't necessarily aware of it. And all of a sudden that's kind of, if not the standard, maybe a more common expectation than it was before. And so where it used to be that I didn't go to other people's events, I didn't really keep up to speed with what other people were doing because I didn't want my stuff, I didn't want my frame of reference to be, for lack of a better term, and this isn't the right term, tainted. That has a negative connotation to it that I don't mean. I didn't want to, I wanted my stuff to be my stuff and have its own distinct personality, and I just know my own thought process. If I get too deep into what other people's stuff is, I may be adversely influenced by, well, maybe I should do it that way. We liked having our own personality to stuff.
I said I can appreciate that. Like, that happens in a lot of realms. Like, I hear comedians talking about not wanting to watch other comedians because they don't want to develop their style and stuff like that. And it's the same thing with chefs too,
Yes.
You want to read recipes and stuff, but you want to stay in your own style, and I think, you guys have always done a good job of that, and I was always impressed with how diverse y'all's events were, and it was interesting to me to watch how Spinistry evolved through all of this, the pandemic times, because, you guys were just, let's try this, we're thinking this, I think you guys did grouped time starts where, everybody was tested and they were starting in groups of 10 or whatever. And it was safe, what is it? Safe distance or social distancing. Shit, I can't even remember.
Right.
But,
right.
And,
you can remember, you just don't want to.
Yeah. But I mean, I remember you guys were just throwing everything at the wall to see what would stick, Like, well, let's try this. What about this? And it just shows how open-minded you are again, just trying all kinds of different things. Like, well, we don't know. Let's see, So it was interesting.
And for me, it was too. I mean, we definitely tried to do everything we could to whatever the either official guidelines were or basically the social expectations were that I mean, we knew that we weren't going to have 500 people show up for an event, but if it's something like, well, if we do it this way, because nobody knew how things worked at that point. I'll be honest with you, I draw a lot of parallels to what we do as what you do or what a restaurant may do. There's a lot of similarities there. And, safety is definitely a major focus of ours. So whereas I might do something myself or with a really small group of close friends that, hey, kind of like what you were talking about last week. Maybe it's, maybe it doesn't meet, food handling guidelines to throw a frozen ribeye in a backpack. Hey, if it's for myself, I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna do that when I'm cooking up food for 300 people, sort of thing. There's definitely a difference there. So when we were trying to do bigger, just more public-based events, we always erred to the side of conservatism from the safety guidelines. But even doing that, we got a lot of flack since we weren't shut down. And that was something that kind of surprised me. We tried to do things from the most conservative basis possible where people still ride bikes, but the perception, well, you know how it is, perception's reality. So some people were just seeing that, oh, you can sign up for this Spinistry ride or this Spinistry event. They're ignoring that there's a virus out there. And they wouldn't even dig down into the details of, this is a time trial. Everybody's starting 30 seconds after one another. We don't want people gathering in groups. Hand sanitizer everywhere. No water jugs. We're doing sealed waters. Stuff like that we always threw into the mix during any of that. Just because we didn't know. We didn't want to be that place where unexpectedly 50 people got sick because something's new in the mix that people didn't understand yet, sort of thing. Yeah. I don't think we ever ran into a situation like that, but that was a learning process for me. Perception is reality, for sure.
But it's interesting that people would criticize all that, and at the same rate, cycling was growing at an exponential rate, It's so funny because people wanted to get outside and ride their bikes, but then everybody was just scared about, well, what's the perception? What is, what's actually going on? How dangerous is this? I mean, we could talk about this nonsense forever.
Yeah. What you touch on there is also leads into why I've somewhat had a mind shift. So that growth of new cyclists definitely had an impact on the events coming out of the pandemic into this year and so forth, because there's a whole batch of people that are essentially new to cycling in the past couple of years that have no perception of what it was before COVID. So they didn't know event structures. They didn't know etiquette. They didn't know this is the way things work. A lot of us just accept that's the way it is. There's a whole batch of new people that, why does it work that way? And some promoters take the approach of, don't ask why, this is the way it is. I'm trying to take more of the approach, you're coming from a different spot. I need to better communicate the whys and the expectations of what we do and so forth.
You mean like the big orange arrows?
Have to explain those every time, but here's like a really big thing that we have to explain every event that we did. We just take it for granted. People don't understand what self-supported means. So it's pretty common for us to have people that show up for an event that have no idea that they're 50 miles out on dirt roads all by themselves with nobody to bring them in, or if something goes wrong, lots of people showing up that don't even know how to change a tire, for example, things like that. And, prior to COVID, that's just something we didn't, nobody did stuff like that until they got to a certain level of experience, was what was going on before.
Yeah.
Well, with the new riders coming on and the popularity of gravel at somewhat of, I'll call it a fad level, a popular culture awareness level is probably a better way to talk about it. I mean, there's a lot of people that bought bikes in the pandemic. They go to a bike shop and the bike shop goes, "Oh, you need a gravel bike. It's the best way to go," which it does make sense. It's like you can do a little bit of everything on a gravel bike.
It's the El Camino of bikes. It does a little bit of everything, but it's not the best at any of them, except for gravel.
Anything. Exactly. Yeah. But, these newer riders, they don't understand why it's presented to them as a do-everything bike. Their perception is, I have a gravel bike. All these people are riding gravel. I'm a gravel rider now. It's not their fault. It's not the bike shop's fault. It's, there's a disconnect between the understanding and the experience level that went into gravel 10 years ago versus what, people coming into gravel now. When gravel really erupted in popularity, the popularity was the shift of traditional road riders towards gravel, was the big thing. So it was essentially already experienced riders, people that understood endurance restrictions and capabilities and things like that, knew how to fix their bike out on the road, basically, knew their capabilities, knew what was outside of their capabilities. A lot of these newer gravel riders are just starting from scratch. So I'm having to adjust the way we do things to better care for that. Anyway, wow, we really went off on a tangent. That one's not on my list. Well, but actually, but it does lead into something that is on my list. And I definitely want your perceptions on this one. And this was another byproduct of some of the podcasts I'd listened to, but other stuff I see in YouTube videos and the influencers, for lack of a better term, the people that are seen as the people that are leaned upon for gravel opinion, the racers or whoever else. There's a lot of mockery of the thought of spirit of gravel these days. And I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm not saying I disagree with it. You, from an experienced adventure rider, rambler, gravel rider, are you familiar with the term spirit of gravel, and do you have any thoughts on it?
No, I don't know what you're talking about. Is that like a smear?
Some people take it as a smear. Some people take it as the goal. So kind of the spirit of gravel connotation is gravel came about and got popular because it's people that weren't taking the riding too seriously. They weren't taking the events too seriously. It wasn't the structured racing format. Everybody was out there to have a good time. Very, very roughly is kind of the spirit of gravel. No rules, just right, sort of thing. Well, as gravel has grown in popularity, and the money's coming in, and the racing's getting pretty big time at the highest levels. Obviously, more structure comes into the mix, more rules come into the mix,
more corporations,
but things like aero bars. That's a big debate topic at the competitive levels or at the organized event levels. Some people say it's against the spirit of gravel for people to ride with. So like aero bars are perceived as against the spirit of gravel by some, but others see it as part of the spirit of gravel because, hey, anything, roll what you have. Anything's fine.
If it's a solitary event, then what does it matter? And gravel really isn't a team event, so to speak. But also, when you get into distances like DK and I'm sorry, Unbound and Unbound XL. You know, like, you're a fool to think you're going to ride 350 miles of gravel and not benefit from aero bars. You know, I mean, I understand, like, the sprint, pack finish, you know, drafting aspect of, like, short course in air quotes, you know, like metric century. Like, I don't see the purpose in aero bars for those format of events, but for the extra long, like, endurance gravel events, you know, 100 miles plus, I think, you know, it's silly to not expect somebody to ride aero bars at this point. But, you know, the reason that people don't think you should is because they look at road races, and those guys don't ride aero bars unless they're doing time trials and stuff, and then they're on a time trial specific bike. But they're also not doing 200 miles, and if they are, they're riding in a pack and they're protecting their main guy for 85% of the time. So it's a different animal altogether. I know I had a lot of thoughts about, you know, the whole rub with aero bars there at the first part too, and, you know, it was interesting to read everybody's perspective, you know, especially those higher ups and the people that were winning races or competitive at, you know, a very high level, and hearing their opinions, because I didn't have an opinion, but it's one of those things. I think that controversy's kind of died out, though, hasn't it? I mean, it's more of a ribbing thing at this point.
Whether it was ever truly a controversy or if it was more of a contrived versy is kind of the way I looked at it at the time. I mean, I understand it was a topic of debate. It's been an ongoing point of discussion for several years, and our friend Matt Stevens is kind of one of the poster children for the use of aero bars, and other people are the big wigs for against it, sort of thing. But so what's going on this year with Unbound? They've banned aero bars for the pro and elite racers, but everybody else can use them. So that's the approach that they've taken. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. That's the direction they've gone. But going back to kind of where we started this discussion, the people that are newer to gravel riding, all those points you talked about that justified what I loosely refer to as comfort bars or gravel bars, as opposed to calling them aero bars. People with experience understand that. They don't necessarily agree with it, but they get that concept. A lot of the people that are just newer to the sport, the discipline, or riding in general, they come in, the way they're funneled in is through some sort of social mechanism, a Facebook group or a website or a YouTube channel or whatever else that gives them a fundamental point of view and a fundamental understanding of the way things work. So a lot of those people come in with blinders on. Well, this is the way it's supposed to work. So they have no experience or other points of view coming in. So there's a lot of black and white. Oh, aero bars are just terrible. Why are they terrible? Because it's what the group I ride with says. Oh, okay. Sort of thing. So I think there's what's the best way to put it?
Aero bars are the MSG of cycling. Okay. I think I understand where you're coming from on that one, but I definitely want to hear your, because I have some opinions on MSG, but I would love to hear your professional opinions on MSG. Well, I mean, a lot of people think MSG is cheating, you know, and a lot of similarities there with aero bars. And it's one of those things that, you know, there's different camps. Like there's David Chang he's a big MSG proponent, and then there's other chefs that are like, no MSG period ever, and I've always been like that. Like, I've always saw it as cheating. But there's simply some dishes that just don't even taste right if they don't have MSG in them. I just think it's funny because it's the same thing. It's a very, very divisive subject in cooking. So,
and again, I go back to this repeatedly. I'm not doing it because you're here. It's something that's been in my head forever. Since we started putting on events. It's I just see a lot of similarities between this and restaurants or food service or cooking in general, because it's real easy for folks to say, why should we pay for a gravel event? I can just go ride dirt roads myself. Sure. Why do you pay for a hamburger? You can make a hamburger yourself. It's different situations mean the different, the different way to go is right at that time for various reasons. Doesn't mean it's wrong or right. It's just this is a different time.
Yeah.
And of course, if Brad Green's making a hamburger, I'm there. I guarantee it.
Speaking of which, we went out and cooked for NICA this weekend at Bridgeport. So I had a dinner Saturday night, and then, the Big Pig Cancer Foundation cooked for NICA at the Bridgeport Endeavor Adventure Park. Pretty cool event. It was like 1,500 people there. And we debuted smash burgers for Big Pig, and I had told Tyler, I was like, dude, we can crank out smash burgers, and we'll constantly have that smell in the air. It's just it's a great thing. And I think I made somewhere around 200 smash burgers, and it was pretty awesome. But we're gonna be at the Irwin race. NICA has another race, I think, in a week and a half. It's on the 26th at Irwin, and it's pretty interesting to see what we were talking about on our ride, talking about the development of new cyclists, and it's almost awe-inspiring to see the level of kids at these races that are they're still in high school, middle school, some of them, and just to see the level of support, the technological level that they're riding, the stuff they're riding, they're riding decent bikes, and the fitness level, you forget how strong youth is as a motor, and some of these kids just out there crushing, and you think, man, they haven't even fully developed. You're looking at some kids that are going to be state level at some point, So, there was those kids there from Austin and Houston, San Antonio, San Marcos, all over Texas. And it was a really cool event. So, and I had never been to that course before. So, and we had good weather other than the wind. So, but,
what Nike is doing is fantastic and amazing. And I think it's integral to the future of the sport. From my perspective, the big missing piece right now is that bridge from NICA age group to mid-30s. That's realistically that's the big hole in the cycling demographic at the moment, for various reasons. The main one being because ultimately cycling's expensive. Generally, yes, you can do it on the cheap, but generally speaking, it's fairly expensive.
Everything that's addictive is expensive.
Yeah, very much so. From the NICA perspective, you have the parental support financially and logistically to help the kids
and you have
get
scholastic
into it.
Sport.
And scholastic sports as well. Generally speaking, where cycling picks back up is mid-30s into the 40s. when people are a little more financially secure, where maybe their family obligations are starting to loosen up a little bit. But there's a huge drop-off in college. It starts at college age, but immediately after college age, basically that U23 gap until the mid-30s, where basically people that were into cycling just go away from it. And in my opinion, a big component of that is, sure, you're in your mid-20s, you're out partying and doing stuff and learning life. That's definitely a component of it. But there's also a lot of people, it's just, I don't have the time to do these things because I'm trying to start my career. I don't have the money to do these things because I'm just starting my career. Yeah. I'm establishing what's probably my first full-time semi-permanent relationship with a spouse or partner or something like that. So everything, there's a lot going on there. But there's a lot of people that would still be passionate about cycling if there were more options for them. So that's something I want to look at going forward, is how can we keep the 20-somethings involved to some extent, at least. I think that's important, and I think NICA system is the ultimate feeder to experiment with that.
Is anybody tapping into that NICA crowd? Like when if I'm a senior in high school and I'm riding in NICA, and I'm not podium, but I'm a contender or I'm top 10, whatever. Like what's the next avenue? Is Timbra, recruiting these people? Is Dorba, recruiting these people? I mean, Dorba's not a good example because it's just local, but, Timbra's statewide. Like these guys, the NICA group, they're racing Warda this year. They're racing Smithville. I can't remember what all courses they're doing, but, they're going all over the state. And I'm just wondering what the next level is for them, because I think that's part of it, is once people graduate high school, they move, like you said, they start completely different lives. But, I think cycling is one of those things that even if they ramp it up real hard during high school, cycling never went away from me. I've always had a bike and I've always been riding, but it's taken less of a priority at times. But I'm wondering what the next natural avenue is for all these NICA riders. That's what I was contemplating when I was watching them.
Yeah, ultimately, that's what I was just talking about. There isn't one. Yeah. And I think that's the gap that needs to be cared for, is post NICA, pre-middle age. There's that audience needs to be better cared for. Sure, the highest level riders that go compete on college teams and stuff like that, or they're in the U23 programs for USA Cycling or whatever, that's kind of the pointy end of the group. And I think it's arguable that those people aren't even properly cared for. But anything that's not at the highest competitive levels, there's really nothing out there that's aimed at them. So that's something that I want to try to myself find better ways to help. I'm not going to fix it by myself, but it's something I want to be cognizant of going forward. It doesn't mean there aren't younger people still riding, and I get it. A lot of it's more of a social pack riding sort of thing. Kind of like your ramble stuff. There's a lot of younger riders that are doing stuff like that, but it's still a huge drop off from the people that were riding in high school and maybe even into college. And then once you get past college age, a lot of people just don't even touch a bike for years. And, well, I was one of those. I think I went from mid-20s to late 30s before I got on a bike again. Didn't even think about it, quite frankly. Let's touch on our Colorado adventure a bit. And
I'm so excited.
Rough out. So I'll be honest with you. I was a little bit surprised to hear your name in the mix. Not a judgment. Not a judgment. I was under the impression that this was going to be, some of those pointy end people only. And I'm not saying, not implying that you're not a capable writer. I don't perceive you as the competitive front of the pack type writer.
But that's a different format. That's a longevity thing. That's a mental toughness thing. That distance is not about speed. I mean, especially in the time frame they're talking about for completion. It's about mental fortitude and just keep moving.
Well, the time frame they're talking about completing is definitely about speed.
The last I heard, they said 10 to 11 days.
Which most people do in around 15 to 18 days.
But I mean, the course record's 3 days and 10 hours. So
there's a wide variability there. There's a wide variability there. Again, I'm not implying that you're not capable. My perception was that it was going to be racer types only, I guess is what I was getting at. Sort of thing. And I think there's a lot of unknowns for all of us on this trip potential. So I'm excited because it lines up very well with some stuff we had on our radar that we were wanting to do, and when I was approached about potentially doing that, it's like, hey, that's right in line with stuff I want to do. So this would be a really good dress rehearsal for that sort of thing. Like our over the top weekend event will still kind of be along those lines, which I was going to use that as kind of the dress rehearsal, but that's only a 2-day, 3-day trip depending on how people do it. Definitely, this goes next level along those lines. So are you a sure thing for this?
As far as I know, I'm 100%.
Excellent. That's what I want to hear.
Step up my training a little bit and start logging more miles, but I'm beyond excited, and I think back to you were surprised that I was included in the group. I think that I was brought in not for the speed aspect. I was brought in from an experience standpoint, because I've done a lot of decent sized trips, and very remote stuff, which I don't even think this is as remote and unsupplied as some of the stuff that I've done.
There will be stretches.
Yeah, and that's fair. But I mean, it'll also be mid-July. There'll be a lot of snow melt. There's plenty of opportunity to filter water and, stuff like that. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm interested to. We haven't even really had a powwow. All I've had was a phone call like, "Hey, would like to invite you to do this," and I was humbled. I don't want to pass it up because it's a chance of a lifetime. I've talked about doing it for a decade almost.
So we did hypothetically set up a powwow date. Has that been shared with you?
Yeah, April something. I've got it.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Anyone that might be listening to this and going, "What the hell are they talking about? Why are they being so evasive?" It's basically we're looking to do a Colorado Trail point to point, and where I'll be helping out to some extent from a supported / semi-supported basis. At least for the overnight stops, and that's probably the extent of my support.
Are you going to mark the course?
No, I'm not going to mark the course. That's not happening. Course is already marked as far as I'm concerned.
Hey, I did have a question. I haven't gone down the rabbit hole, speaking of the course, but I did read that you have to go around all the nature preserved areas, like from
the wilderness areas.
So how much of a mileage difference is that? And what do those detours look like? Do you have any clue?
Well, I mean, what are you referencing against? What is your perception of what the mileage of the route is?
Oh, I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Like, it seems like the way I read it, it's a detour, so I read that as additional mileage. I was just curious.
It's not a detour. It's an alternate route for bicycles. So there's a bicycle route for the Colorado Trail, and there's a hiking route for the Colorado Trail.
Okay. So if you're through hiking,
yeah, cyclists never look at the hiking route per se. They always look at the bicycle route. So it's the same mileage regardless for the bicycles.
Okay.
Is what it boils down. It's 590, I think, something like that, roughly between 500 and 600, somewhere in there. I'm working from memory. I broke it down into some suggested segments that for lack of a better term, the team leader. I sent for his review, and I haven't heard anything back yet, but I think he was having trouble seeing the maps. So, and we definitely want to get that sort of stuff nailed down. I think the segments that I roughed out generally work pretty well, except I'm concerned about the last stretch between, I think it's Silverton and Durango. There's not a lot of options for me to meet y'all in between there. And I think from what I can tell by looking at the maps, it's probably some of the most rugged terrain as well. So there's one spot I had mapped out as a meetup. Hopefully it's not too much of a stretch from Silverton to there, but we'll better clarify those things going forward. But I do plan to definitely lean on your expertise for mapping out what resupply might look like on a day-to-day basis, and make sure I cover the bases there. But in turn, the expectation is, I'm gonna lean on your expertise and input on the front end, just so we don't make any fundamental mistakes. But you're just out there during that trip to enjoy yourself and have a good time and not have to worry about any of the logistics of anything except meeting me just like everyone else.
I mean, I think, we have to have a decent plan. I mean, with, I don't know, I'm interested to see how it's broken down into digestible days, and then obviously we need to have alternates that align with that, That's the trick to it, though. There's not a lot of alternates available, sort of thing. So I think and that's what we have to work through, is I think the alternates have to be a plan B at the rider level. There's not a lot I can do outside of, there's only certain spots where I can meet y'all, because the Colorado Trail is not completely accessible by any stretch of the imagination. No, I get that.
Generally speaking, I'm meeting at towns or near towns and crossroads for the most part. Anything in between, it's not a realistic expectation for me to drag a trailer up there, sort of thing.
Yeah, I get it.
The plan B is going to have to be everybody's packing 2 or 3 days of basic supplies on a worst case scenario basis is what's top of mind for me at the moment. But that's does everybody need to carry 1 day's extra, 2 days extra, 3 days extra? Don't know yet. That's what we have to work out as a group. And the big wild card to that is, and I'll be honest with you, it's my biggest concern, and I'm not again, being surprised that you were on the list isn't from your overall capability point of view. You would actually be the person I was probably least concerned with. I'm definitely concerned that there's people that could be going outside of their, beyond their comfort zone, but outside of their capabilities. That's the one thing that I want to make sure we have cared for on the front end, sort of thing. But that's why we're going to meet and talk about these things. I'm excited. I'm really excited by this one.
I'm trying not to get too excited.
And I reached out to my buddies at Ska Brewing yesterday, and they're on board too. So
yeah. What a great finish line.
Which bike are you planning to take? Your big boy?
Man, that is the golden question. I'm thinking 12 speed on the monkey, the karate monkey.
Okay.
Nice hardtail. Decent bike packing capability. And then I'm also entertaining possibly doing the Fargo. I don't know though. I mean, I'm still thinking about it, but I'm way more comfortable on my Fargo, especially as an all-day bike, and even through all the rough terrain and nonsense. And that bike rides so much better loaded. I did Arkansas Triple Crown on it, and I didn't want for anything else. I mean, I didn't, it's a drop bar mountain bike, and I run a 2.6 up front, a 2.35 out back. So it's definitely a super capable off-road bike.
Any idea what the others are thinking about riding, or is it too early to have any feedback on that?
I'm sure they'll be on full swishes. I mean, I don't know. I just think a decent hardtail's what I want. I mean, I saw a review of two guys. One of on is it bikepacking.com or bikepacking.net? I can't remember, but the main pictures were two guys on custom tie, full rigid single speeds. So I mean,
sure.
I don't think suspension.
I mean, obviously,
a necessity. Yeah, you could do it on anything.
I haven't.
People have done it on a unicycle.
Sure. I haven't dug down to that level of minutia yet myself. I think it's along the same lines as, how do you go touring? If you're the person that loads up 80 pounds of stuff on your touring rig to pedal 20 miles a day from one city park to the next, that's a different adventure than somebody that's trying to knock out 150 miles a day, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think obviously you can ride anything if you have enough time, sort of thing. So yeah, I just what I've seen so far, there's definitely sections of the trail that seem awfully darn woolly and sketchy. So I'm not saying the squish bike is the right bike. I'll be honest, I was just a little surprised that it's not even under consideration from your perspective. But I don't know at this point.
Well, at that point, though, if you're walking, you're walking. It doesn't matter what bike you're on. And when you're on a trip that long, you're not going to be burning a lot of matches. You're going to be conserving your matches, and you're not going to be taking a lot of chances. Like, I'm not going to just send stuff at mile 240, when I still have 300 more miles to go, So, plus the big bike's heavy to begin with. And then you can't put a bunch of stuff on it because of the limitations of the triangle. So it's very limited.
Yes.
And it has no, it only has one water bottle holder, and it won't even hold a full-size water bottle. And my intention is to keep stuff off my back if I can, or run a very minimal pack, just for like change of clothes and stuff. Hopefully I don't have to rely on that for hydration. I don't know what my pack is going to look like, what my pack out is going to look like yet, because I haven't really gone down that far and we haven't discussed like what our resupplies and stuff are going to look like. But I mean, I'm down to bike pack the whole thing, or I'm down to do some kind of hybrid situation. I mean, I have all my stuff, but you know, that's the other thing is I'm typically a hammock camper, and I haven't even figured out if that's feasible on this trip. So,
well, let me walk you through what I have roughed out so far. And like I said, I haven't had any feedback on this, so this was my best stab at it with limited information. But so, and when I give elevation gain, it's based on ride with GPS map data, which probably leans a little bit to the low side for these types of routes. But day one, I have it 53 miles, 7,800 feet. Day two, 61 miles.
That's a big day.
60. No, that's a small day. Day two, 61 miles, 6,700 feet. Day three, 46 miles, 8,500 feet. Day four, 67 miles, 7,800 feet. Day 5, 61 miles, 7,100 feet. This one hurts. Day 6, 48 miles, 8,900 feet.
That's a 9-hour day.
Day 7, 67 miles, 6,300 feet. Day 8, 43 miles, 7,000 feet. So that's a couple of days to kind of recoup from day 6. And set up for day 9, 58 miles, 10,200 feet. And day 10 is roughly 35 miles and flat. So it's a coast into Durango day sort of thing.
I'd be lying if I didn't say I was intimidated. I mean, those are all big numbers. You know?
Well, and again, that's meeting that 10-day schedule. I mean, obviously there's variability built into that. You know, if things go sideways somewhere, or if things go slower than expected, you know, it stretches out from there, sort of thing. But to meet that 10-day schedule, that's what it's going to take, basically, one way or another. What I have mapped out there may not be ideal.
Yeah. My thought is, you know, when you do a multi-day trip like that, a lot of people try to grab a big chunk the first day, and it's overwhelming. You know, that's my initial thought. It's a shock to the system. You know, because day 3 is really where you typically hit your stride, and you start going, oh, okay. Your body starts going, oh, okay, we're doing this again, you know. So, but hopefully I'll be ready.
Just ride your bike. You'll be ready. Would you just show up basically in Denver the day before and be ready to roll the next day, or would you get up there ahead of time a little bit, or don't know yet?
Man, I really don't know. It just depends on what my schedule allows. I mean, I have people all over there. So I've got a real good buddy that's cycling. I mean, an ex-roommate of mine that's still an active cyclist that lives in Castle Rock, who I'm probably going to reach out to, that I'll probably stage out of, or at least get there a little bit ahead of time to sort things out, so to speak. But I haven't thought it through completely.
Maybe that's something for our shiftless format we look at down the road. Maybe get somebody on that is a Colorado Trail veteran and get their thoughts on it and things like that.
Who do we know that's done Colorado Trail?
I honestly don't know anyone off the top of my head that's done it end to end. I'm sure we probably know some people. Yeah, need to find an expert. I don't even know who that might be. Do you have any ideas of who? expert may be that's already within. I mean, I'm not afraid to travel outside of our circle, but if we have a circle that includes somebody like that, I'd prefer to go that route. Has Gorilla and his crew done any of that, or anyone like that
Probably.
that you know of?
You know, I'm going to talk to Tucker at the end of the month. I bet he's written portions of it. I know that he's written portions of it.
I want to talk to somebody that's done it end to end. I think that would be the route to go. I'm going to play with that, and I think that's probably a pretty darn good ending point for this episode. Unless you got something else you want to throw into the mix. Did I miss anything?
Not really. No, I don't have anything really to add. I think we covered a good breadth of topics, but I am, I hadn't even thought about it up until we started talking about it, but I'm way more than interested to hear anybody that's done it. One of the people that I would love to speak to, period, is, and I can't remember her last name, but Alexandra. I know she's done all the stuff, and I think she's based out of Texas now. I could be wrong, but I know she rides for Chumba, who is based out of Texas. But she's done Colorado Trail twice, at least, that I know of. And she's also done AZT and Tour Divide. I mean, she's just a beast. I'm a huge fan. But she also did it single speed, which is even more incredible, and flat pedals. So, just to bring this whole conversation full circle. But, and she seems like a great interview, and she seems real humble and down to earth. Obviously, we don't know her, but she'd be a fantastic person to talk to.
I would definitely love to talk to her at some point along the way, and quite frankly, there's probably a multitude of topics that she would be the appropriate expert for. So she's definitely. So we can agree that she's on our wish list for somewhere down the road. Yes.
Absolutely, like wish guest list.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this, but just like last time, stay on board till you get that confirmation that you're all uploaded. Going to try something a little bit different with the edit this time that hopefully makes it a little quicker and easier on my end. We'll see how that works. And I'm going to try to... Are you good for this... for Wednesday next week as well, roughly this time, as far as you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I am going to try to get a guest on the books for next week. I have a couple of different guest topics in mind that I want to reach out to. It probably would not be Alexandra next week. That's something else I want to try first. But we'll give it a shot. And thanks for joining me, buddy. Appreciate it. It's always a good talk.
Always a good
Catch you next week.
All right. Later, man.